Today we're going to talk about, network security post-quantum overview and trends. We'll go into the lineup, and we'll have a roundtable discussion and a snapshot of upcoming events. So quickly, Quantum Marketplace is a forum for raising brand awareness, facilitates collaboration, deals, and partnerships. We have both a web directory on the QED-C homepage, where various companies list their offerings to the marketplace. Where you see a pink icon is companies that have already presented. Also, you can go to our YouTube channel and you can see prior web events with all the videos there. This one will also be posted once it's processed. So, what are some of the overview and trends in the space? So today, we have Carl Williams from CJW, we have Aegiq, we have Toshiba, we have Anametric, Aegiq, and Xairos and EvolutionQ, a full lineup spanning the spectrum of companies that are working on network security post-quantum. I thought it would be good to just give a quick refresher, since there's going to be a lot of material in here. These are some very commonly used acronyms for network security terms for mathematics-based solutions, and then also for some of the quantum-based solutions. These, of course, are not an exhaustive list, but just to get an idea of what we're going to talk about here. So we thought it would be useful for this topic to ask a question, take a poll. We highly encourage the audience to vote. What amount of your network endpoint connections are wireless, as in your cellular or wireless connections. So take a quick, so Crystal, you're going to share that. So we'll come back later after everyone has presented and discuss the results. Okay, Carl has graciously accepted to give the overview. He's a world expert on network security post-quantum. And so, Carl, are you there?
I am here, and I won't say I'm a world expert. I know enough to how to get myself in trouble. So next slide. So I wanted to start with basically just talking about the risks. So just laying out why do we all care about post-quantum security? And this goes back to the fact that we've known since the time of Shor that effectively one of the things a quantum computer can do is to attack public key infrastructure. And so I kind of wanted to give a view on this. And so I'm going to present some plots here. They're based on 3 papers. The first is this paper on how to factor RSA 2048 in 8 hours using 20 million qubits. Then there are 2 other papers here that are on elliptic curves. Elliptic curves were always believed to be a more efficient use of resources and to provide better security because they were harder to break classically. And we'll come back to that. But the reality is we all go to HTTPS websites, we do banking transactions, we do everything else. And so public key infrastructure is what protects us. And it is really the handshakes that form the front end of it that cause the problem. It is the authentication, everything else, because that's how we effectively pass the symmetric key or use AES or other things to do the actual encryption, because you don't actually use Shor elliptic curve to do the encryption. It's just the original handshake, authentication, digital signatures that are key. So effectively, when you're done, it is 2 problems. One, you're either doing factorization or it's discrete log version, or you're looking at elliptic curves, which have a discrete logarithmic attack as well. So next slide. So here I am presenting a plot. And let me explain these plots. For elliptic curve key size, which is the bottom x-axis, you just divide the elliptic curve key size by 2, and you get the number of bits of security that's in that elliptic curve. For RSA or Diffie-Hellman, which is kind of the red curve, the yellow and blue curve or elliptic curve attacks from quantum mechanics. But for RSA or Diffie-Hellman, which is the red curve, you have to look at the computational complexity of the general number field C, which is believed to be the most generic general attack. And from that, you can back out and determine the number of bits of security. And so the red curve is really plotted only against the top axis, while all the things are plotted against both the elliptic curve, either the top or bottom, just going from the top to the bottom is just dividing by 2. You look in these algorithms, you ask, well, what is the depth of the code necessary to do this? How many qubits does it take? You can roughly multiply those out. And this gives you some kind of view of what the complexity of solving the problem on the quantum computer is. No error correction, nothing else. It just says, here are the number of error opportunities. And roughly 1 over that number will be the underlying error rate you will have to have in order to successfully complete the computation. Now, I show this in part because it basically shows you that it is easier on a quantum computer to break elliptic curve than it is to break RSA or Diffie-Hellman. So if we go to the next curve, it's just a blow up of this one, next plot. And what I show here is a blow up here, and pre-2015, it's basically the oval on the left that described what the recommended key sizes were for general use. Again, these are the numbers from basically recommended by NIST. Today, we have moved a little farther up the curve to RSA 2048 or elliptic curves of around 224 bits. And these are what we're using today. And so what is crucial here is to understand that on the when quantum comes, elliptic curve, which was thought to be harder to crack classically, is actually easier to break on the quantum computer. So, this is something, a recognition and an awareness. Next slide. So we now understand what the threat is, and so we have to prepare for a world with quantum computers. And the issue is most people believe that a crypto-analytically capable quantum computer, one that has a low enough overall error rate to get through one of these calculations, that this won't happen before the mid-2030s, 2035, maybe 2040, but it takes roughly a decade to replace the public key algorithms. So PKI infrastructure needs to be upgraded. And it needs to be cheap, easily upgradable, patchable, because little problems occur in the algorithm or something else you need to fix, or there's an overflow someplace or something else, you need to put a patch in. And increasingly today, at least one endpoint of almost all connections are wireless. Again, everything I have at home, it's wireless. I do have a wired connection into my wireless box from my FiOS, but that's not optically. So this issue of replacing everything means that I have to do something that's compatible with the technology I'm using at the moment. And of course, what I'm using is wireless. And I don't think QKD solves that problem. So given these attributes, this implies that quantum resistant cryptography is what we're mostly going to use when we're done. The issues with QKD is upgrades typically require new hardware. Hardware remains relatively expensive. Hardware requires fiber or line of sight optical communication. Can't be done on a wire, can't be done wirelessly. So it kind of reads back to what is the role of QKD and quantum communication in quantum internet security? Next slide. And here are some of the possibilities. So quantum communication is essential for connecting or extending quantum devices. And we're going to come back to that as I finish up this slide. QKD also provides a way to inject randomness into the transport layer security, into the TLS. QKD could be useful in back office security or along high value links where people are using inline cryptography in the things. It could be important in a data center or any other high-value network as an additional layer of security, because security in depth is something of value. But notice, it is mostly some specialized links. I mean, we don't put inline encryptors in most links. And I think the final thing to point out about QKD is why it is the simplest and easiest quantum communication to implement. And so if you can't do it, you can't do any more sophisticated protocols. But I don't think that QKD by itself, other than some specialized links, is going to have a lot of issues. But I want to come back to this point. If you build a quantum computer capable of doing cryptanalysis today, that computer is going to be 50 meters by 20 meters. It's going to be a gigantic machine. And I am going to have coherent communications from one end of the machine to the other. I need quantum networks. I'm not going to build, at least with the technology we currently understand and believe might be viable, I am not going to build a quantum computer capable of doing cryptanalysis without quantum networks. And finally, and just coming back to the closure, there are several papers out there. Everybody would like to find an economically viable problem prior to hitting the place where we start breaking the security of our HTTPS web connections. But today, it appears that the only known problems, known, provable problems, are some things on spin dynamics of small quantum systems and everything else. Almost everything that we know and know how to implement at the moment requires more cycles and more capability. That doesn't mean that we aren't going to find them as the hardware improves, a heuristic algorithm that has economic value. I believe it will happen, but it hasn't happened yet. And so with that, I'm done.
Okay, so we just had Carl Williams give the overview, and so we have today, we have Mark Nichols from IDQ, we have Lee Johnson from Toshiba, we have Jim Gable from Anametric, we have Max from Aegiq, we have David Mittling from Xairos, and we have Michaela Mosca from EvolutionQ. So Mark, you're first. Please share your slides.
All right, so good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Nicholas. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Quantique, and I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that Carl brought up a few minutes ago and tell you what we do at Quantique to help companies and government to become quantum safe. But maybe to start with, maybe a few words about Quantique. The company was founded in 2001 by 4 physicists of the University of Geneva. They had great ambitions to use quantum technologies for telecommunications, and they had this idea of improving the security of telecommunication. Well, at the time, the quantum computer threat was already identified, but still seemed to be decades away. But to their eyes, it was so significant that fighting that threat would be IDQ's mission from day one. Now fast forward to 2018, the quantum computer threat has become much more visible. Large telco companies started to be very interested in our solutions, and SK Telecom from the South Korean peninsula invested in IDQ in 2018, followed by Deutsche Telekom. And these investments have the opportunity to accelerate productization, industrialization of the product range, as well as have allowed large-scale deployments. Today, our headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. We have subsidiaries in Seoul, South Korea, and Boston, Massachusetts. We're set up to do R&D, engineering, manufacturers, installation, and commissioning support globally. 125 people in total, with large proportion of engineers and physicists. Let's look at the way we're organized. We're organized in 2 business divisions. On the right-hand side, you have the Q sensing product offering, which combines single photon detections and high resolution timing electronics to perform single photon detection and photon counting functionalities. In fact, single photon detection is a key functionality for the quantum safe product systems and solutions. And therefore, it was critical to fully master this from day one and to have full control over the supply chain. That's the reason why we have significantly invested in this product range since the start of the company. On the left-hand side, you have quantum safe security product range, which combines QKD or quantum key distribution and quantum random number generation, QRNG. On the bottom left, you have our QKD product offering. And then in the center, you have, which is a product which is probably the first mass production quantum-based product that was brought to the market. It's QRNG, quantum random number generator chips. They are now integrated in several types of products, including a mobile phone. And on the picture, you have the Galaxy quantum phone from Samsung. And today, they're developing the 4th generation of that phone that includes this quantum key, quantum random number generators. Now, let's spend a little bit more time on the QKD product offering. As Carl said, it's absolutely key to develop a product that is completely and fully compatible with existing telecommunication infrastructure. So that was at the core of our design efforts. And the 4th generation that we are presenting here includes 2 models, one designed for core, the backbone of the network, and a more cost-effective versions for edge of the network. These systems come with dedicated software for quantum key distribution and management to guarantee end-to-end post-quantum data communication security. Now let's illustrate how this is deployed in the field. Let's have a look at an example here. So this is what we have in Korea. This is called the G project. This is a network which is more than 800-kilometer long fiber optic network that makes the connection between different government agencies. On the left-hand side, you have the physical layer, which corresponds to the actual fiber link between the different QKD devices. There are 27 of them connected in series, forming 1 backbone ring and 2 peripheral rings. In the center, you have what we call the KMS layer, or the key management software layer, which is a virtual layer, which has been specifically developed to be compatible with multi-operators. We actually have 2 telco operators using that software layer to exchange keys. Currently, there are 17 QKD nodes that are connected to this KMS layer, which means that there's 10 more that can be added to the software layer, and not talking about the additional QKD boxes that can be connected to these rings to extend the network. And finally, you have the red dots on the right-hand side that shows the 8 consumers, which basically are encryption systems used by government agencies that are exchanging keys. And the software is able to use optimized routing between the different QKD boxes, which in total makes a total of 127 secured links to manage, if you take into account all the options to route keys through the network. This is already deployed, active in Korea, thanks to SK Telecom and SK Broadband, the partner in this project. Now, why is this important? It is important, as Carl highlighted, because it cannot be excluded that encrypted data are being stolen already today. They will be decrypted with a quantum computer in the future. That's what we call the harvest now and decrypt later strategy. And because a lot of data have confidentiality duration requirements of years, and some even infinitely confidentiality requirements, so protecting data communication is very important today already. So what we're doing on a daily basis is to help enterprise company and telcos to become quantum safe by offering platform as a service or quantum safe as a service. So with this, I'm just going to ask you to stay tuned and join us in this exciting journey.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name's Lee Johnson. I work for Toshiba. We are a large global corporation, and we have a portfolio of ICT and security solutions. We also have a strategic and a significant investment in quantum technology. So I work for the Quantum Technology Division, and we provide research and development, commercialization, sales and deployment of a range of different quantum technologies, which include single photon sources, quantum random number generators, quantum key distribution, twin field QKD, satellite QKD, quantum key management systems, cryptography, integrated quantum photonic devices, and quantum repeaters. It's really our objective to help enable the deployment of and the transition to quantum secured networks. And our vision for quantum is, well, within around 5 years, we see a global platform for a quantum secured network. So this is a secure comms platform built for the quantum computing age and immune from future computing threats. In 10 years or so, we see pervasive use of the quantum secured network and ultimately leading to the development of the quantum internet. So Toshiba is a global leader in QKD. We have a number of firsts that we've shown over the last 20 years or so. We were the first company to show QKD over 100 kilometers, the first company to show QKD over 1 megabit, then over 20 megabits. We were the first to demonstrate twin field QKD, which promises to expand the range of QKD to 5 or even 600 kilometers of fiber. So this 20 years of R&D has resulted in the launch of our commercial QKD product around about 2 years ago. And during this time, we've also had a range of global QKD deployments. We have some interesting use cases here with the Open QKD network throughout Europe. We've shown a quantum secure industrial deployment. And more recently, we deployed with BT the quantum secured metro network here in London. So we have value through our technology. We can help you deploy your quantum secure networks today. Our products are commercially available. They can protect your sensitive data. They can also help mitigate against harvest and decrypt attacks. And of course, QKD will work together with PQC when the standards are ready and available. We have unique technology in our QKD systems, and this provides better business outcomes. Our long-range systems help you reduce your CapEx and OpEx. Our high secret key rates help you provide a range of diverse use cases to multiple users. And our high-performing multiplexing technology helps you overlay QKD on existing fibers together with your existing data services. Our continued R&D program helps the scalability of QKD, so you can deploy core and access networks with QKD. Twin field will help with inter-country and countrywide networks. Satellite QKD will bring QKD services intercontinentally, and QKD on a chipset will help enable QKD to mass markets. What do we hope to get from presenting today? Well, we'd like a conversation. We'd like to understand your business objectives and your path to quantum secure networking. We'd like collaboration. We'd like to work directly with network operators and technology vendors, government and private businesses, really to help drive the global quantum ecosystem and global quantum technology deployment. And finally, we'd like to see more commercial deployments of QKD and quantum secure networks globally and more deeply. If you'd like any further information, or you'd like to have a discussion with Toshiba on our products and our systems, I've put the relevant aliases here and also a URL to our QKD page. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jim Gable. I'm from Anametric. I'm president of Anametric. Anametric is a small company in Texas. We're working with a team of professors from SMU in Dallas, and also under contract with AFRL and some work with Army Research Labs to build a new line of quantum photonic chips, but these chips are targeted towards cybersecurity applications. Now, the big way for cybersecurity applications in quantum is, of course, the quantum safe transition. And the previous speakers, and in fact, probably everybody on this call, being a QED-C event, probably know plenty about the threat of quantum computers for today's encryption. And also, it was brought up earlier, the window coming in closer because countries harvesting all encrypted data today to decrypt it later. So what we're doing is we're helping build a better defense. We do this with the quantum photonics combined with a CMOS classical control. And I find it a little bit ironic that even at our small scale, you still combine the quantum photonics with the classical controls. Just what they call hybrid with large-scale quantum computers also affects at the very small scale that we're working at. And this allows us to do things like quantum random numbers, running the NIST algorithms, also something that is a new kind of secure ID, which is more resilient to machine learning attacks, which are actually, of course, a current threat, not an off in the distance threat. So Anametric, we don't have products in the marketplace today. So what I wanted to do is give you an example of some of the technologies that we're developing as part of this project. And this is about the Hadamard gate. Hadamard gate is the most fundamental gate possibly in quantum science, because this is what puts particles into superposition. And when you're doing it in photonics, you're using a structure like you see on the left side, which is a conventional Y coupler. And in a Y coupler, essentially what happens is a photon moves through that waveguide in the middle, and it hits a fork in the road. And at the fork in the road, it doesn't go left or right. It actually goes both forks at once. And that's putting the particle into superposition. This is a very, very common structure in quantum photonics. And when you just glance at chips from quantum photonic projects, you'll see a lot of these Y couplers. What we're doing is based on SMU research, which is a different way of building a Hadamard gate on a chip. So here what we do is we take two waveguides, and where they cross, we put in a very thin trench. And if you size that trench just right, what happens is as the photon hits that trench, it goes into superposition because it's both reflected and it also is transverses straight through the trench itself. So that is a new way of doing it. But what's the advantage of that? And the advantage of that is that the active area, the space on the silicon chip, is so much smaller. And this really matters in quantum photonics, because the biggest problem in quantum photonics is really absorption of those photons. So the smaller your circuit, the less chance for absorption. So this is a really useful step at a very fundamental gate. This is an example of the kind of work that we're doing. Now, as I said, we're pre-market, but we're still really busy. And we're busy because we have prototypes of these chips in the lab at SMU. What we do is we build these structures, and then we run them in all kinds of different ways and characterize them. And then that will come together to our working parts. And we are also doing this work with a lot of different partners. And we are planning to do a preview unit later this year. And the reason that we're participating in Marketplace today is that we know we don't know everybody out there. And we certainly don't know all the different ways this technology might be useful to other people. So I encourage you to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much.
What happens next? And let's dive into the networking bit. So something that Carl briefly mentioned, he said, well, what's going to happen, like really, is that you need networking, as a more advanced form of communication and really linking things. And that's something that sort of sits in the middle of frontier cybersecurity, or cybersecurity post-quantum, and also quantum computing, because that's the only thing that's going to be enabling really large quantum computation one way or the other. And so it happens that photonics is really the only working glue there right now that can be done. But before that, let's just step back a little bit and have a look at the utility and the value that current digital technology offers to us. So this is a map of internet, as it's called. So it's basically a collection of all public IP addresses in different continents and networks. And I think it just shows the scope and the scale and like the level at which it's penetrated our lives. And so what I'm alluding to is that quantum technology not only supplements this, but it needs to offer better utility as well. And here's a little experimental example. So, it's not a real one, it's a mental exercise for you. But let's say, we have what's underpinning that big network is the fact that we have undersea fiber cables. So the vast majority, 99% of the traffic goes there, and it looks like this. And today, you can have cables that take 250 terabits per second, across Atlantic, easy. And then let's take an average commercial QED system at a distance of 100, 150 kilometers, and you'll end up having the fact that if you wanted to just simply get that speed out of the systems, you'd need to populate 2.5 New York cities with racks of QED systems. And it just shows that, it's a great start, but it shows the utility there. We still need to work on this. And in our view, the best way to get that utility is obviously to, you need to increase the density and power efficiency of everything. And the best way there is same as we've done already with digital is it's about foundry manufacturing. And in this case, photonics is really the key to everything. And you have to do it in a hybrid way because you have multiple different functional elements in quantum. And they all need to be maximized in their efficiency. So you have no chance of compromising on losses because you only have one photon, or you have only one particle or one qubit. The next thing is obviously it needs to sit in a small form factor, all of it. So all control, everything. And I think everybody in this virtual room already said, well, it's a rack, it needs to fit in there, but like computers as well have to do that. And finally, obviously, it needs to sit on existing infrastructure. So you cannot really take all the fibers out. You cannot reinvent in an instant all of the manufacturing. And so all of these things is what we're doing, is ensuring that it's all kind of compatible and low power, low volume, low swap, if you want. And so if we take the frontier cybersecurity networking angle of what we're doing, so we're engaged in a number of activities, including some of the more advanced QED protocols. But I've just outlined some of the things we're doing in terms of hardware services and kind of rolling that out to the customers. And we do like to work with people at early stages when they're trying to explore for themselves what is the roadmap and trying to help to build them this. But I'm going to give you a few examples of things that really important in this. And one of those is the generation of quantum states. So it needs to be deterministic. That means that whenever you send a trigger, you push the button, it definitely is generated. I think we take it for granted in digital, like it is what it is, but actually in quantum, it's not so much. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do, and that's what we're doing. Moreover, you need to have, in order for that to work in a quantum way, to have the quantum interference, to have the scale, all of those features, all of those photons, all of those qubits, they really have to be physically indistinguishable. So they can have quantum entanglement and interference in between them. And that's, again, a very difficult challenge. And you haven't seen that in digital, but we've done it. And finally, you don't need any noise, because any noise means massive errors. So you cannot stand any kind of a background noise or something like this. Well, in principle, it exists always, but you need to minimize that to an absolute zero if you can. And we've done a very, very good job at that front as well. So now let's look at the little challenge actually there in quantum, because we said networking, we need to link things up. And there's a bunch of applications in quantum overall, including computing and communications that are dressed in optical spectrum. And it's, that's what you really call a spectrum. Like things are really on a spectrum. So you've got to address, everything from visible, even ultraviolet, all the way into infrared, where the telecom sits, and then there's also free space communications. And so we focus on some areas which we feel are going to be kind of where the strategic convergence is going to happen for multiple reasons. But in particular, obviously, that's a fiber infrastructure and C-band, and also near infrared, where a lot of other things are happening. And so, and what we're doing, so here's actually things that we started selling in November last year. So we rolled out to market our single photon sources as the most basic form of that quantum state generation I was talking about, with very high specs. So there's a choice of different housing modules for all the control, all the cryogenics. So everything literally sits in that box. So you're not talking about those IBM kind of chandeliers that sit somewhere in a huge dilution refrigerators. You need some control, you need some custom lasers. That's all done. And here's a couple of examples how you can configure this system. To be more performant, to be less performant, to look in different wavelengths. Well, just give us a call and we'll sort you out. Whatever you're doing, is it an experiment? You're building your next generation network? You're building a satellite link? And speaking of the networks, well, here's the example of how you can use this. We can go up to 10 nodes, but well, this one is for 4. Again, simple couple of boxes in your rack, and you're sorted for your 10 node or 4 node network. Easy. And it can be standard QED, it can be entanglement distribution. You tell us, we'll get it to you. So there's more things to come. So watch this space, but I think that's already a great start. And hopefully we can help you as well with something. So thanks very much.
Yeah, so my name is David Mittling. I'm the CEO of Xairos. A little bit different from other groups here. We offer quantum time transfer that we believe is very, very important for network security by augmenting timing from GPS. Now, when people think of GPS, they think of this, your location app on your phone, but the GPS's real value is the clock for the world. All networks, financial transactions, and power grids rely on a timing signal from GPS. And if when GPS ever went offline, we would lose all communications and power within a couple of days. This is a huge problem, it's very well known, that needs to be solved. And that we think quantum time transfer gets us there. Now, when you think of security, you look at QKD. QKD provides the highest level of security, but GPS, the timing comes from a weak RF signal that is trivially easy to jam and spoof. It pretty much has zero security element to it. So the value proposition of quantum time transfer is it provides integrity of the signal, a trusted, authenticated timing source, and availability by making that link very difficult to jam. It's set up similar to entanglement type QKD, but in this case, in entanglement type QKD, you're sending entangled photons between 2 parties, Alice and Bob, and it creates a random string of bits that is used to create a set of encryption keys. But in quantum time transfer, we want to synchronize Bob's clock to Alice's master clock. And if the distance is the same between, distance is known between Alice and Bob and static, then we can use that exact same setup for quantum time transfer. Now, in cases where the distance isn't known or it's dynamic, we use two-way time transfer. That way we can remove distance as the unknown variable. It doubles the hardware, but it also adds a bit more precision to the accuracy of the system. Now, quantum time transfer works fundamentally the same way that RF and optical time transfer works right now. Alice creates a signal, it's an RF signal where the phase changes create a pseudo-random code that is tied to her clock. Bob measures that. He has the same pseudo-random code that is tied to his clock. They do a correlation, and that correlation peak tells you the offset between Alice and Bob's clock. So quantum time transfer works fundamentally the same way, except you're using the discrete clicks that come with the photons hitting the detector. But in the case of optical RF time transfer, Eve also knows that same pseudo-random code, so can transmit that and maybe convince Bob that it's Alice, the source. But the creation of entangled photons in quantum time transfer are fundamentally random. So Eve can't know that pattern and can't pretend it's Alice. The other value of the security element is the fact that Eve can't measure Alice's signal and retransmit it the same way it can with the RF signal due to the no cloning theorem, and so can't create a delay and spoof Bob. Now, we've already built this in a proof of concept, but now we're looking at this as an architecture that can augment timing from GPS. So you can start with a satellite, for example, that synchronizes to a master ground station clock, say from JILA or U.S. Naval Observatory. That then becomes the master clock over a large geographic area that provides time distribution over a network from the satellite and through fiber. And then this becomes a nice way to augment GPS because Then you can provide that last mile RF signal to your consumer device through cell, position and timing signal through a cell or Wi-Fi signals. And, you know, the value of this is particularly for urban canyons and large cities indoors. That's a much stronger signal. It's a much more resilient backbone that can't be spoofed or jammed. So as a company, we've this system protocol was invented by our co-founder in 2018 and written in a paper. It was patented. We formed the company around that technology in 2019. Got a number of U.S. government contracts. But the papers were out there, and other groups have replicated some of the original work that we've done, particularly in China. So Chinese researchers have, you know, kind of developed this, and definitely, as it's probably a lot of people on the call know, or this webinar know, China is very serious about having quantum secure networks. But most of these groups have focused on one-way quantum time transfer over static links, over fiber. We built our proof of concept to demonstrate two-way time transfer and advanced simulation to look at this for dynamic links. So as a company, we're now kind of at that turning point where we have some commercial opportunity to install our system in networks for network providers that want to add that level of security. With this webinar, you know, we want to have partnerships and investment. We're a small team, so we want to be able to address those opportunities. So that's what we're doing. Thank you.
So over the past few decades, we've increasingly found ways to benefit from connected digital technologies, and that's wonderful. But at the same time, of course, it makes us much more vulnerable to a wide range of cyber attacks. What kinds of cyber attacks? Well, there's many different ones we now face, and there's going to be new ones over the coming years, surely. How are these attacks enabled? Well, they're enabled by exploiting a wide range of possible vulnerabilities. And some of these vulnerabilities, and therefore their attacks, they're relatively routine to detect and remediate. Others are much less common, but they're more systemic, more impactful, and harder to remediate. So we do have to worry about the systemic threats, even though we don't see them as often. When they happen, they could be, you know, potentially unrecoverable attacks. In fact, the USA cybersecurity strategy explicitly calls out the need to pay attention to systemic technical threats. And of course, cryptanalysis enabled by a quantum computer is one such threat. But it's important to also remember that this quantum threat is just one concrete example at the end of the day of a more general threat, and that's of mathematical or computational attacks on a computationally secure cryptography algorithm. So I consider the quantum threat a blessing in disguise, because the threat is real enough to stimulate the development of more resilient cryptographic infrastructure, but not immediate enough to cause widespread harm. So now let's benefit from this opportunity to build a cryptographic infrastructure, you know, fit for the 21st century, where our dependency on digital technologies is tremendous already and increasing. When should you start this transition? And what should you prioritize? Well, that depends on a number of parameters, including the shelf life of the data, the migration time, and your expected time for threat actors to get access to cryptographically relevant quantum computers. It also depends on your risk tolerance, whether you're willing to accept a 5% risk, say of it happening in 5 years, or a 20-25% chance of this happening in 10 years. So there's a number of moving parts here, and the quantum risk assessment is where you would start, sort of prioritize what you should address. What are the mitigations for dealing with this risk that our key agreement algorithms or key establishment algorithms could be broken? Again, it depends on the risk tolerance, right? For certain national security systems, right, there's clear guidance: do not rely, at least not exclusively, on asymmetric key agreement. That risk, while it may be small, is just not acceptable for some really important digital platforms and information, right? Whereas for other systems, regular, very convenient and elegant asymmetric cryptography is good enough, is considered good enough, at least for many applications and platforms. And what about everything in between, though, where some heavily guarded manual transport of a pre-shared key becomes impractical or prohibitively expensive, right? And as Carl alluded to in his opening remarks, important protocols like TLS and IPsec, they actually allow for the injection of pre-shared keys, additional randomness, in addition to the asymmetric key establishment. Right? So if we can find more practical ways to establish keys that don't rely on asymmetric key agreement, then there's already a natural, elegant way to fold them into very important, widely deployed existing protocols. Now, in theory, QKD is the best solution to key establishment because it doesn't require computational assumption. As long as the physical security and authenticity assumptions hold at the time of key establishment, the resulting key can't be cryptanalyzed later, can't be mathematically or computationally attacked later. But for this to really be helpful in practice, to make our digital systems and the world safer in practice, we have to be able to deploy it very widely and in very practical ways. And of course, we're delighted to see robust commercial grade deployments of QKD, including by our friends on this event. At this event, we've all been working together, supporting a strong ecosystem, including the development of standards to support interoperability, and really to make the proposition of QKD, of using QKD, more attractive for the end users. Our part at EvolutionQ, and we're based in North America as well as Europe, has been in enabling the reliable, scalable, and interoperable global deployment of QKD, right? And we do that by focusing on the network layer software and key delivery part through a framework we call a quantum delivery network. Now, the objective of a QDN is for a network of QKD links through trusted nodes to enable key establishment between any two locations in the QKD network by performing a series of a small number of information theoretically secure key swaps. We also engage with end users to assess their risk and help them determine where this extra layer of assurance QKD provides is worthwhile, where it would add the most value, and also to engage in designing QKD networks in a practical way into their solutions. Right. Again, the vision is an interoperable suite of different vendors, free space, fiber. There's lots of reasons why customers would want the option of several vendors. And again, as an ecosystem, we can assure the end customer that this flexibility and interoperability is possible and can be managed easily, and the likelihood of wide adoption will be higher. So what do we do alongside our services that help with this journey? Well, which journey? Well, you could go to the Sifter webpage, and it can walk you through the steps from preparation, testing, analysis, to ultimately migration to quantum safe cryptography. So in addition to those services, we have our flagship quantum delivery network product called BaseJump. We also have a BaseJump Sim product that allows users to cost-effectively simulate large QKD network configurations before deciding on and deploying a QKD network. And BaseJump Last Mile's a very secure method for extending the reach of QKD networks to the last mile part where there isn't a quantum connection. So please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to learn more about managing the quantum threat, how to design and deploy a scalable and interoperable QKD network, whether it's as a partner or a customer or any other meaningful way. Look forward to talking to you.
Thank everybody for presenting. That was fantastic. So let's get into the panel discussion. I think the first thing would be curious to see how the poll came out. Carl, since you suggested that we do this poll, I'm gonna ask you to respond on this first. What do you think of the response? You there?
I'm somewhat surprised because I know mostly what I do. I move around and almost everything is wireless. I guess I travel too much or everything else because I think most of our connections today are wireless, even in a lot of businesses. So somewhat surprised. But I think what's really important is that is how do we extend QKD or extend security in realms where QKD can apply, and it just really requires the fiber network. So I'm somewhat surprised at the responses, but it's interesting.
Okay, great. Michaela, any thoughts?
So I'm not sure if people were answering it, whether it's exclusively wireless, because probably it's a bit wireless and a bit fiber in the back end. So and still significant fraction did select close to 100%. So clearly we do have to worry about the security of the wireless links. And that's why, I think all of the QKD providers have been thinking about that last mile problem. How do we keep this higher grade of assurance, even if we don't have that quantum link and do it in a practical, interoperable way. I think we all acknowledge our customers. That's, we have banking, customers in the financial sector and telco sector in Europe. They're working with us on how to secure that last mile where you can't have quantum communication, but with something that's better than just standard post-quantum key agreement.
Right. Mark.
Yeah.
Any
So
thoughts?
yes. So as Michael said, it is surprising. It's not surprising because there's a combination of fiber and wireless in any cases, and that's probably the reason why we see this. If I'm trying to relate with what we have done so far, and let me come back to the QRNG in a quantum phone. The idea was to have the best possible key to start with, and then to use QRNG also for authentication of users, and then use QKD on the backbone. And then, of course, you only have QKD on the backbone, but you have on the sides, you already have an extended and an improved, enhanced security for users. So that's the first step in trying to offer an improved and enhanced security. And then going forward, there's going to be a combination of PQC and QKD going forward. Yeah,
great. So Jim, Anametric, you're doing QRNG. Any comment on this?
Well, it makes sense just from the users' kind of last mile to their desktop. I think a lot of people still sit down at a desktop that could be wired, even at home. I do that. So the numbers made a little bit more sense to me, but for a long time, we have felt that the future is going to be predominantly PQC algorithms, then augmented by QKD where it makes sense. So, but the interesting thing is that the kinds of parts that we're working on and other people too, they belong in all these networks. All these systems are improved by better random numbers, but also by some of the other functions that we're working on. So it's as the quantum networks grow, I think the opportunities will grow for us too.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Lee.
Yeah, I'm also not surprised by the mix of wired and wireless, skewing towards wireless. I think there's definitely a place for QKD within the terrestrial networks, but also PQC working together with QKD, in my view, is the best way around this.
Yeah, great. And David.
Yeah, I was going to say too, if you polled a bunch of young people, college students, it's pretty much 100% wireless. Everybody is all about working wirelessly, mobile devices.
Would you say just telephone? Would you just say mobile phone? Or
it's again, that's I'm in the old school era. I'm connected to a LAN. I sit at a desk with a PC. That's the old way of thinking, I suppose.
Yeah. And then Max.
Well, I think I'm actually surprised that there was votes for 0 to 25%. So I mean, I'm 100% wireless. Like in Aegiq, we don't have wired internet connections, so it's all flexible, so office and things. So it's I don't know, but I guess it just shows the challenge as well, and how the structure is going to be multi-layered actually going forward, because you can do pretty amazing things with fiber and short distance connections when it comes to quantum. And the biggest challenge is, of course, wireless. And eventually, I believe there will be devices capable of doing at least QKD wirelessly. But the defense from attacks is always, again, multi-layered. So you have a whole host of techniques, including obviously QRNGs, better, beamforming, and there's a whole range of things that can be done there.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you everybody on that. So Mark, I'm going to go to you. You actually suggested this question, and I thought it was great. Providing network security post-quantum solutions has become a major priority of interest throughout the world, right? What's changed? What's changed now?
Well, I think what has changed over the last few years is the interest from government agencies, from large telcos, and from financial institutions in general. And this change is stimulated by the fact that there starts to be a liability issues. You know, if data starts to leak and will be decrypted later, you know, if there was a solution, why was this solution not adopted? So there's more pressure on some organization at this point to do something to guarantee long-term security. And the other thing that has changed is the development of network solutions. So the QKD are no longer point-to-point systems. They can be put in network. They can be multi-operator compatible, multi-vendor compatible. So we can start to network different QKD systems. And that is a very important enabler, fully compatible with telecommunication infrastructure, fiber optic networks, and also compatible with large-scale deployment. So that is for me the things that have changed and that have enabled or that has stimulated the interest. So
yeah, Lee.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with Mark on this one. You know, certainly the interest with the operators and government agencies, and also the points on interworking. But also, in my view, there's been I've seen a massive interest in investors in quantum computing. It appears that almost daily we see a new startup, or some new funding, or some new advancing technology. So the acceleration of quantum computing, in my view, has changed things in the last few years.
Okay, great, thank you. Jim?
Well, I think along those other topics, I think you cannot undersell the importance of the progress that NIST is making towards the post-quantum algorithms. And that has been just hitting on their schedules. And now the algorithms have been selected. They haven't been fully scoped out, and haven't been certified by a long shot. There's still a lot of work to be done. But I think that NIST deserves, and Carl, you have to close your ears here. I think NIST deserves so much credit for not just this work, but being really pulling in all the support from the Western world and Asian world. And it's you know, with two notable exceptions, it's a global movement, and I think it's really gone quite well. And of course, it's going to also be continuing, so that these are not the last post-quantum algorithms that we will see. And so I think people are also planning ahead to make their systems more flexible to be able to take future algorithms as well.
You want to comment on that, Carl, since he pulled you out?
You know, look, I think, again, the recognition by everything from the World Economic Forum to governments and everything else that one has to be ready is critical. And PQC is a large part of the solution. But of course, as Michaela and others have pointed out, security in depth is important. So if you have high value links, they exist today, you know, coming up with solutions that provide additional layers just make it more difficult for the attacker.
Yeah, and so both you and Michaela are on the World Economic Forum, correct if I'm wrong, right? So I mean, you guys are both in this discussion all the time. You know, I think you've said in the past, you know, if we don't get this right, then this affects all of us economically, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Michaela?
I had great examples from my colleagues on sort of the two sides of the equation. You know, increasing desire to do something. You know, Lee mentioned, you know, quantum computers are advancing, so that the threat is getting closer. And you have, you know, U.S. government, for example, having directives saying, for these set of systems that we're responsible for, you're moving to post-quantum cryptography. So that's a good motivator for vendors to the U.S. government, and similar governments around the world are doing, you know, similar things. And on the ease of doing something about it side of the equation, we heard some great examples. And there's, in addition to those, there's more best practices being articulated. So you kind of know where to start, and they're authoritative, like FSISAC, the Dutch Banking Association, World Economic Forum, and so on. So more motivation, and it's easier to do it. So I think that there's several inflection points.
Yeah, great. Max.
Well, it's hard to add something here because I think we've covered all the key points really on the fact that you start seeing, I mean, people start doing these things because they're required to do. You would expect that specifically the PQC certification, it's going to be there within a couple of years as a sort of mandatory for the majority of organizations around the world. And so it drives also a lot of literacy. Once we kind of getting used to the idea that quantum is a thing, and okay, we do get more and more qubits. Okay, it's not yet there, but who knows? And every now and then there's a paper claiming, oh yeah, we've just broken the RSA, but 20 bits, still. It sends those shockwaves every now and then, and it becoming a common or like mainstream, and that's a very important aspect of this.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to that hopefully if we have enough time. But thank you for pointing that out, David.
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to echo one of the comments, that, Mark made too, which is, I think it is being driven quite a bit by the government agencies, at least from what we've seen. You look at what I'm highlighting that in my presentation about what China is doing. They're very committed to creating a global, a quantum secure network within China and globally with satellites. But I think the commercial networks, in the United States and the Western world, they tend to be a little bit slower to adopt. They're commercially minded. They're bottom line focused. They're not. Security maybe is not the top of mind that it should be, but I think now we're starting to see the advent of these quantum test beds. These tend to be public-private partnerships, kind of sponsored and set up around, national labs in the United States. I think that's the way we're going to get, we're going to start to get the trickle into that quantum security into networks. Is probably through some of these quantum test beds that are going up, around the U.S. and the rest of the world.
Right. Great. Okay. So what question are you hearing most from your customers today? I'm going to go right back to David on this. What are you getting from your customers? What are they asking you most?
Well, again, we're focused more a bit on the timing backbone rather than QKD or some of these other things. But definitely the weak link of the kind of time distribution across networks is GPS. So I was just at a major timing and synchronization conference about a month ago, and panel after panel, presentation after presentation, they talked about the problems this is creating for them. So, again, network security is starting to be top of mind with these kind of commercial network operators. And I think that's only going to, kind of grow as things, but to a certain extent, they tend to be bottom line focused. So maybe it takes, large disruptive outages for people to say, okay, we gotta really add that level of security onto our network.
Yeah, thank you. So Mark, I was very impressed. IDQ is deployed heavily in Korea. What are you hearing from your customers today?
So I'm guessing there's two types of questions. The first question is, what does it take to deploy QKD in a network? What are the different steps and what are the equipment required, the connections with the current encryption system, and that's it. So very technical questions. And then there's a different type of customers, and I'm specifically talking about the telcos here. The telcos are very interested to see how they can monetize this. What kind of new business can be developed on top of that? What kind of offering can be developed to their customers? Is it something which is about selling keys or selling secured bandwidth with QKD, or is it just an additional line which is secured by QKD? So these are the questions about the different business models that needs to be developed with this new technology. So I would categorize that into these two categories.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Lee.
Yeah, similar comments again. So we see a lot of questions on when and how best to implement quantum secure networks, how to deploy the networks with the existing infrastructures, also with the existing operational procedures, and again, how to develop interesting new use cases and monetize.
So deploying in a existing telecom network with QKD, right?
Yeah, but also not the network infrastructure itself and all of the associated technology. How does it work with the operational side of things? Because there are processes for all sorts of deployments that have to be adhered to.
Oh yeah, that's true. Especially telcos. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Jim?
I would, well, we're early stage, so we get a lot of
But
practical
you have
questions.
customers that you're working with, you're partnering, right? What are they telling? What are they asking you?
Yeah.
Right?
So we get very practical questions about what we're doing, but what strikes me that we hear more than I would expect. We hear just fundamentals about how this works. Is it really a real threat? We have some large corporations that are saying like, well, we know about it, but we have to convince our bosses. And I also feel like there's good awareness in the kinds of corporations that we talk to and we're all working with, but that if you were to magically measure awareness of this threat throughout businesses, it would be really still quite low. So I think that's an interesting part, is that the future is here, but not evenly distributed.
Yeah, okay. Max.
Yeah, so I think we're focusing a little bit on the slightly more futuristic technology in terms of what we're offering. So it's not like we don't do commercial QKD systems today for our own reasons. But the question that really often comes up is, well, firstly, certification. So how are you gonna, if that's important, and how are you gonna align, the thinking? What's the framework for performance measurements, for security measurements? So these are kind of major ones. And if we're speaking specifically about, say, telecom operators, well, this is a challenge always for a small business in terms of, are you a reliable supplier?
I see. Great. Michaela, you're in the middle of this. What are you hearing most from your customers today?
So for those at the beginning of their quantum safe journey, most common questions are, where do I start, right? And the next one is, how much is this going to cost? Like, especially the big companies. So they're clearly looking at, I need to put a budget line in, into my annual budget. How big should that number be, right? And of course we say as big as possible, but we try to justify it. For those who are further down their journey, they've done a risk assessment, they kind of know what their roadmap is. They found the use cases where they're like, we can't justify relying just on asymmetric algorithms. We want an extra layer of assurance, and we think QKD is right. And they're worried about how easy is this going to be to deploy? How robust is it going to be? Is there going to be interoperability? Can we avoid vendor lock-in and these sorts of things, and certifiability? All these pragmatic issues that we've known about forever, and I think we have been working together as a community to address them.
Yeah, great. So Carl, you have customers too. What are they asking you about all this?
I think this has been largely covered fairly well. I mean, I think the two things I'll come back to, and they've already both been mentioned, is when will the threat really be here? And this is, you have to think about the value of the data you're securing, as a couple people pointed out. But when is the computer going to be here, and when is PQC going to be ready? When are these other systems going to be available? They're mostly looking out and seeing a kind of a cloudy future still.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. This is I think this would be very useful to ask this question. Michaela, do you want to take this? Not everybody has to answer this, but I want to just make, for the audience here and everybody on the panel, does everybody know how internet security actually works? You want to do this, Michaela, or do you want to do this, Carl, or somebody else? I vote for Michaela.
I can go, and or unless you
Yeah,
want.
why don't you go, and then we'll go if anybody wants to add anything.
So just compressing several semesters of internet security courses into a few seconds. Then I'll focus on some foundational pieces where it's clear how QKD fits as well, right? This is obviously a simplification. If you go to the IETF, and there's just countless standards and protocols that make the internet work, as well as other standards bodies. So it's obviously complicated, but at the foundations, it's really elegant and simple. So when you're browsing the internet, you find your favorite online store, you want to buy something with that HTTPS, that guarantees that you really are talking to the vendor you think you're talking to, right? At least with certain assurances that you're really talking to them. And that's because they give you, they use their digital signature using their public key. Of course, you probably don't have their public key, right? If it's just a random vendor. Your browser has several dozen or 100 even public keys, but it's probably not going to be, but certainly doesn't have thousands in all of them, right? So then how do we solve that problem? Well, they give you their signature with their public key, but then they give you their public key signed by someone else's public key. And maybe that person's public key is in your browser. If not, well, then you get another. There's a chain until you finally get a signature from somebody whose public key is in your browser. And of course, you hope that's authentic. And now you have this chain of signatures that's convince your browser that, yeah, that's who you think it is. And now you further use these public keys to do a handshake, like a public asymmetric key agreement. Right? Now you share a secret, a symmetric key. We don't encrypt the information with the public key encryption. It's just not, there's a number of reasons why you wouldn't want to do that in practice, but you get a symmetric key, which enables fast symmetric key encryption. And there is, as I mentioned earlier, also the option of injecting additional randomness in this TLS and this transport layer security protocol for whatever reason, if you want to. And that's where QKD could fit in this broader, really elegant framework that I guess is also known as public key infrastructure.
Okay, great. Carl, you want to add anything there?
The only thing I will add is I think Michaela described it quite well, is we should all recognize as well that because of Grover's algorithm, there is this quadratic speed up of doing massive searches for symmetric keys. But that's a pretty easy one to fix. You just double the key length and it's just an OR for those keys unless you're using SHA or something else. I mean, but so fixing the symmetric piece is easy. It's the asymmetric piece that's the hard piece. And of course, that is often key to the authentication of the digital signatures, which are something that we have to have and support. So really crucial.
Okay, anybody want to add to this? Mark, Jim, you good?
I like to kind of just chime in there too, Mark, because it's useful kind of recognizing what, this theme here was network security. And in my mind, or, there's more formal definitions of it and so forth, but, it's about trust when you're in the network. I trust that what is coming from, and there is this move, and this is kind of leading the way, I would say, is with this, what they're calling the zero trust architecture. And that title kind of says it all. I don't trust anything around me kind of setup. Now within our system, is probably a whole different topic, is resilience. The ability of the network to stay up and operational. But, hey, the theme was security on the side. So, we talked about security, but in my mind, resilience of networks is also very critical.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, Max, I'm going to go to you on this. You actually proposed this question to me. How do you certify and prove that a future cryptographic solutions are indeed working in a post-quantum computing world?
Well, since I've said this, I think, and not just cryptographic, but also hardware solutions. So I think it's an open kind of question, and it's an ongoing thing. It's about what is the best way to ensure that, how do you know that your quantum thing is really safe? we have plenty of penetration testing that's been done, again, digital world for various things. But then also, I think there have been some standards already. Obviously, ETSI's done quite a bit of work, and others on how do you standardize some of this, and eventually it should come to this. But it is a sensitive topic, right? So how do you test your systems? Well, internally, how do you verify for yourself that it does indeed work? Because we know there are known. I mean, they're very sophisticated and difficult to do, but nevertheless, attacks do exist on even QKD systems. And the way we look at it is kind of moving further away from kind of being super standard, but instead like trying and use all those techniques in a kind of almost test run, and see if that does anything. But I think it would be great to hear comments on this rather than a specific answer. Mark, you're muted, but I cannot do lip reading again.
Jim Gable.
Well, my thought on this one is the future here will be similar to the past here, in that in the past we've had standards break down because machines get faster or new attacks are invented, and we've had to replace various parts of cryptography many times, and it's been hard. Some old code is always the laggard out there, and I think that'll continue to happen in the future. But I will say, and this sounds a little odd after the conversation, but I will say that I think for a lot of the companies this looks just horrible and daunting, but in reality it will be part of their upgrade paths that they were already going to do for their systems. The tricky thing is now they have to get very intelligent about how they prioritize the different parts of their system, and what areas of their business need to be converted first. But it's not a one-year transition. It's going to take years and years and years. We've had plenty of large corporations say it'll take us 5 or 10 years to do this. The government has bigger systems. So I think in some funny way, it's a little smoother than people might gather from the conversation so far.
Yeah, Lee.
I really have nothing to add here, apart from the fact that, it will take time and things will be constantly tested by bad actors. So, yeah.
Okay. Mark.
Yeah, so maybe the way we see it is we actually need standards, and there are organizations working on it, so standards for QKD, and we need certification to really accelerate the adoption. So working together on the standardization is actually very important. And I think most of the people, if not all the people on this call, are involved in these initiatives, which are very important.
Yeah, David.
Now, this is a little bit outside our bailiwick, but I think that's like the other people are saying. It's always just a game of one-upsmanship, right?
But also, your timing network is based on single photon detection. It affects you too, right?
Yeah, but the nice thing about us is we're starting from a very low level of security.
Okay, fine.
Symmetric encryption keys is much more challenging. You need that confidentiality, but it's always a game of one-upsmanship, and the security proofs are much tighter for that kind of posture.
Right. But as we also talk, timing is a critical issue to the network. So if you're going to have a quantum, layer, you also need to make sure that the timing is secure on that quantum layer.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. Yep.
Yeah. So that's why I think you fit here. Carl, what do you think of this question?
Well, I think everybody's hit it. I think the ultimate answer is, you want something to be truly secure. just don't tell anyone and never put it out on the internet. Everything's going to break, and it breaks in different ways, and it breaks for different reasons. And this is why you do things in depth. And I think that's a lot of what we've been talking about today is security in depth. You see about we're getting patches that go into our computers all the time and everything else because of an overflow here or something there. And some of these create breaches that then allow compromises on our computers and all. So, we need to do what everybody's doing. But again, security is something that is done in depth. And will they create truly a zero trust world? I somehow doubt it. It'd be nice if it existed, but I somebody would screw that one up too.
Yeah, Michaela.
Yeah, we've already touched upon like the two different levels. Is that the algorithmic layer? Like, is the algorithm good? Is modulo some mathematical assumption in the case of post-quantum, or can you actually prove its security, modulo authentication, and so on in the case of QKD? There we use standards, right? Standardized specifications that have been scrutinized by experts all around the world. Then, so if that's ever broken, right? If there's a mistake in those protocols or there's a way to algorithmically break it, that's a big problem. Implementing it properly doesn't help. But we have to also implement them correctly. There could be side channel attacks, bugs, software bugs, and so on. That's at the implementation layer. Again, if an implementation is flawed, you can fix the implementation. But if the algorithm is flawed, then it's really not much that you can do with the implementation side of things. So, and at the implementation side, then there's things like FIPS and common criteria, and engineering best practices that help us give us a level of assurance that you can certify the device that it's being implemented properly according to these specifications.
Right, and back to what the spirit of Max coming up with this question, thinking along the same lines too, is even if we deploy the perfect QKD or quantum entanglement distribution and PQC for where you can't deploy that, there's still ways to get to the information, and there's sometimes these alarmist things on the internet, but the infrastructure could be even solid, but there's still ways to hack things at the ends. There's still ways to hack things in, say, air gap facilities and that sort of thing too. That's all been proven, right?
Well, I would just add one other thing. I think I first talked to a group of chief security or information officers about 15 years ago, and one of them says the cost of a human rat, 30,000 euros. So the insider threat will always be there. The cost of a human rat may go up a little bit, but there
you're saying a human rat,
rat, yeah, somebody that's been purchased.
Okay, 30,000. Okay, yeah. Okay, great. All right, so we are out of time, but I think so. On June 8th, we're going to have a quantum marketplace on service firms. So tune in for that. And we'll ask this question and maybe go off recording, Crystal.